So do you remember X-Men Origins Wolverine? Yeah, the bad one.
Would you like a bucket?
So you might not remember this, but at the time, that full movie was leaked online like a full month and a half before it premiered in theaters. And it just got completely eviscerated by everyone to the point where Hugh Jackman almost quit being Wolverine. A thing that not even the beautiful cinematic death of the character could do, apparently.
Hey, Hugh, you want to play Wolverine one more time?
Yeah, sure, Ryan.
His exact quote in regards to the terrible response that X-Men Origins Wolverine got was this, and I'm not joking. Quote, "I don't know what else to do. I don't know where to go." Oh my God, Hugh, are you okay? Do you need a hug? Has anyone checked on you since your Music Man revival failed last year? We should do that. We should send someone to go check on Hugh, please. This movie was supposed to kickstart an entire new franchise of movies, right? Like they were so confident they titled it X-Men Origins: Wolverine, as if you could expect to see more X-Men Origins: movies in the future. And that was the plan. I believe the next one that was officially slated was X-Men Origins: Magneto, but we never got that. I mean, we got most of his origin in X-Men First Class, and I don't know how much I would do different about that, but we were supposed to get even more of these movies, but we didn't because this first try was just so truly awful. Imagine calling your shot so boldly, then whiffing it so hilariously right off the bat that you abandon everything else you had on deck. Didn't mean for there to be so many baseball idioms in that last sentence. Really came out of left field, you could say. I'm throwing curveballs at ya, which actually might be appropriate because the failure of X-Men Origins Wolverine happened because of a strike, a writer's strike. Specifically, the writer's strike from 2007, even more specifically. That previous writer's strike led to a ton of terrible movies and shows of that era, and honestly, good. Writers are critical components for storytelling, and that was only proven by the fact that Transformers 2 exists. That's not to say that bad movies can't exist even when writers are properly paid. I mean, the other Transformers movies also exist. But X-Men Origins Wolverine is a fun example to dissect like a little mutant experiment, not just because they sewed Deadpool's mouth shut, unintentionally creating a hilarious visual metaphor for how they were responding to the writer's strike. Don't let Deadpool talk, okay? We didn't hire any writers for this part. But also because it's a movie that starred Wolverine and Deadpool that was filmed during one writer's strike, and now there's another movie starring Deadpool and Wolverine being filmed during a new writer's strike. And instead of taking a rain check, which is another baseball reference, they're going ahead to just continue production on the movie, which could be an even worse idea than when they did it the first time. Let me explain. This video is sponsored by Ground News. Stick around until the end of the video to learn about a sale they're having for just the next 7 days. The year was 2004. A young David Benioff wrote the original script for X-Men Origins Wolverine. I say young, how old was he? What's 2004 minus 1970?
It's 34.
Okay, so he was still older than I currently am. That makes me feel, I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse. Age means nothing, you can do anything at any time. Hope this guy's doing okay. Hope he didn't co-ruin a beloved franchise. He pursued this idea of a solo Wolverine movie for like 3 years before he was officially hired on, and then it took him like another 2 years to actually write the script. Wait a minute, I hear you asking. So they actually did have a script for this movie. They had a writer for this movie. Then how was it impacted by the writer's strike? A lot of ways. The script was impacted in a lot of ways by the writer's strike, the first of which is that it was completely rushed. The writing was on the wall for a while that the WGA was going to go on strike, so a lot of studios tried to get ahead of this strike and really rush out projects that were either close to being done or just anything that they could so that they could continue to make money for the following couple years. One of my favorite examples is G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra.
Yo, Joe!
I feel like this movie was similar to Transformers in that they really wanted it to launch an entire cinematic franchise, but the first movie was just not good. It just wasn't good. You remember how the climax of the movie involved G.I. Joe's shooting big chunks of ice that would then sink in the water to destroy Cobra's underwater base? How ice sinks in water. Probably could have had a writer tackle that ending, give it a second pass. And look, people have come to this movie's defense by saying like maybe there was a lot of heavy metal infrastructure in the ice chunks and that's what caused it to sink. That's one, I don't care, right? That is just one part of the movie that I could critique. The whole thing is bad. And even still, G.I. Joe had a full script, which is more than what you could say for other movies at the time, but it was rushed to beat the writer's strike. And the same thing happened with X-Men Origins Wolverine. Well, kind of. Wolverine had more of an incomplete screenplay, and it did start production, principal photography, before the screenplay was even finished. But I thought the Game of Thrones guy spent like 3 years writing it. How is it incomplete? You'd never believe it. It's a shock to everybody, but the studio interfered a lot. By the time they did start filming, the original script was basically just scrapped. The original script was said to be a lot darker and more character-driven. It had a more complex portrayal of Wolverine's past relationships and all of the trauma that he's gone through, living all this time and causing pain to so many people. But what sounds like what happened is that the studio executives knew that they weren't going to have many big blockbuster movies for the next couple of years, so they didn't really want this darker, subtly toned, like introspective piece about Wolverine. They wanted an action-packed, like adventure action movie. They wanted it to be like a capital S superhero movie. It's fun, it's for the whole family, it's got jokes and wacky stunts. And this led to extensive rewrites of the original screenplay, a ton of reshoots, and just overall way more notes from the studio that fought with the vision of everyone else involved. So I mentioned the dialogue before, and when you compare and contrast the original script with what we got, almost none of the dialogue is the same, and instead it's replaced by like cheesy 80s action flick type quips.
I didn't sign up for this.
Having fun yet?
Do shooting first, asking questions later.
Look what the cat dragged in.
I come with you. I'm coming for blood.
For some reason, that's the vibe that the studio wanted, presumably again because they wanted that like big summer blockbuster, but they, the studio executives, aren't writers, and they thought that a big summer movie needs to be akin to an over-the-top 80s movie, like the 80s movie Over the Top.
The world has always bet against Lincoln Hawks.
It's a movie about arm wrestling. It's pretty fun. In fact, I looked this up. The second unit director for X-Men Origins Wolverine also worked on a bunch of 80s action flicks like Batman, Superman 2, Rambo First Blood Part 2. Yeah, a lot of twos in here. Guess that's what it means to be a second unit director. No, it usually means you're in charge of stunts and action sequences, so you know that this guy had to make Wolverine ride a motorcycle into a helicopter. Hell yeah, dude! And have Deadpool cut a bullet in half in slow motion.
Okay. People are dead.
Look, I'm literally a millennial, and even I cringe whenever I see anyone do the whole, like, so that happened. I mean, is that seriously the best quip they could come up with? Yes. You see, probably the biggest departure from the original screenplay versus the movie that we actually got is that Deadpool wasn't supposed to be in this movie. He wasn't in it at all, and neither were the other distracting cameos like Gambit or Professor X or Cyclops, which took up a bunch of the movie for some reason. I mean, why not just wait for X-Men Origins Cyclops? Don't spoil me so soon. Tell me already full from good content. I believe that was the initial plan, though. All these characters were added in to be like last-minute setups for future X-Men Origins : movies, and we know how that turned out. I don't even think this movie was originally supposed to be called X-Men Origins Wolverine. The director of this movie, Gavin Hood, said in an interview a while back that the title of this movie that he was in the middle of directing was changed on him without any warning or notice. The story goes that they were late into production, and then suddenly Hugh Jackman pulls him aside and shows him the IMDb page for the movie they're currently filming, and he says, "Kevin, why is this movie called X-Men Origins Wolverine now? I didn't know that's what the name of the movie we were making was gonna be." I'm sure that Trident accent was offensive to everyone? Is it safe to say everyone disliked that? So basically, the only writers they had in production were the studio execs who were constantly changing how the movie should be, from the title to the script to even the actors they should use, without actually communicating any of that with the director. And when Deadpool was added to this movie extremely late, they didn't have any lines written for him because the script never included him in the first place. And to make things worse, he's a comedic character, right? You can write cheesy action movie dialogue if you just have some random nobody character in the background, whatever. But you're supposed to write jokes for this guy, and nobody wrote jokes for him. Ryan Reynolds would later say that the only thing written on the script about Deadpool was, quote, "Deadpool shows up, talks really fast, and makes a lot of jokes. Yeah, we'll just think of some jokes later." How hard could that be?
Okay. People are dead.
Yeah, so that was improvised because it had to be. Same with every other line that Deadpool said in this movie. It was all improv. And you know what? Honestly, props to Ryan Reynolds for at least trying here. He only had like one action sequence in this movie where he was able to give Wade some personality of the comic book character. And it wasn't perfect, but you know, it's in the right ballpark.
Thank you, sir. You look really nice today. It's the green. Brings out the seriousness in your eyes.
Oh my God, you ever shut up, pal?
No, not when I'm awake.
He didn't even want to do this version of the character, but the studio execs said that they didn't have the budget to do the full costume of Deadpool and to like portray his powers accurately, I guess. Which is odd, because you'd think that they could just repurpose the money that they weren't spending on writers. Drew Gooden posted a Gooden video about this recently, but most people don't realize that writing doesn't stop when you hand over the screenplay. If there's a joke that doesn't land or a comment that doesn't work because of the way that the set is dressed or a prop looks different in person than it was written on the page, you need someone there on set in production who can write new lines, who can tweak the script to make it work with how things are in actuality. So even though parts of the screenplay were written, it wasn't finished before they started production, and they didn't have anyone on set to spitball ideas for rewrites or even jokes for a character who is supposed to be funny. Which is why it was easier for them to literally sew his mouth shut at the end of the movie so they would have a built-in excuse for not having to write anymore.
Yeah, Stryker finally figured out how to shut you up.
And I can't stress this enough, the original script never had Deadpool in it. He was added in by the studio execs. They caused their own problem. It was their own fault for introducing a notoriously quick-witted comic book character to this script without any plans to write anything for him, so their solution was to give him the Black Bolt special.
You didn't have that mouth on you, Wade. You'd be the perfect soldier.
The saving grace here is that Ryan Reynolds just has so much natural charisma, and he's a pretty good improviser.
People are dead.
Sometimes. However, they're actually not allowed to rely on his talents for Deadpool 3. You see, Ryan Reynolds is a bit more hands-on with the Deadpool franchise than he was with X-Men Origins Wolverine. He was just an actor there. But for Deadpool 3, he's not only the star, he's also a producer and a co-writer. Now, not to get too inside baseball for you, but according to Section 12 of the Writers Guild of America's 2023 official strike rules, the strike that's going on right now as they're filming Deadpool 3, Mr. Reynolds is not allowed to improv or change any of the script in any way. It doesn't actually call him out specifically in the rules. That would be wild if it did. No movies written by AI, better royalties for streaming services, and don't you dare let Ryan Reynolds anywhere near a movie set. We haven't forgotten about the nines.
How many times should the number 9 come up?
Basically, Section 12 of the strike rules talks about how hyphenates, who are people who serve dual capacity roles on a movie set, like a writer-producer or a writer-performer, are prohibited from performing any writing services during the strike. But the ones that stick out to me are these: casual minor adjustments in dialogue or narration made prior or during the period of principal photography. So literally no writing any part of the script or improvising on set. Changes in technical or stage directions. That means no physical comedy improv. Stick to what's written on the page. And instructions, directions, or suggestions, whether oral or written, made to a writer regarding story or screenplay. Don't think you can get around these rules by telling non-union writers about your ideas and improvements for the story, okay? And then having them pretend it was their idea all along? No, 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 no. Now, I presume that the script for Deadpool 3 is in much better shape than X-Men Origins Wolverine was before it started going into production, and that they have more lines written for Deadpool than X-Men Origins 0 lines did. So it's not like it's necessary for Ryan Reynolds to show up and improvise, or else there would be no movie. But now they're basically beholden to what is written on the page, with no room or freedom to play with it a little bit. And again, I want to stress, in case it wasn't clear, I fully 100% support the writer's strike that's happening right now, especially with the decades-long rise of streaming services and this current boom of generative AI and large language models that is like threatening to take creative jobs away from creative people. Sort of a hot take, but I think technology is better served to relieve people of dangerous jobs and unfulfilling labor. But that alone is probably a bigger discussion than pay writers better, which again, I agree with. I just sometimes feel like I'm not allowed to talk about current events without also tying it in with a superhero thing.
Now, you may have heard about the writer's strike, but that's boring. But what if it impacts Deadpool 3? Oh no! Does this bit feel mean-spirited? I'm sorry.
A strike is supposed to be disruptive. That's the point. So if Deadpool 3 is Ryan Reynolds' last time playing this character, as he claims it will be, and he even managed to drag Hugh Jackman back to the claws despite everything, despite a beautiful ending to his portrayal of that character already existing, then it would be really disappointing and sad to have this movie flop and leave these characters and these portrayals of these characters on such a sour note. But much like X-Men Origins Wolverine, it could serve as a great example of how important writers are. Fingers crossed, they knock it out of the park. So as I was finishing up this video, I had one final thought that I wanted to say. As I do more of these shorter videos reacting to current events, I have to dig through a lot of online publications, and a lot of them I'm not super familiar with. As I was trying to find articles about the writer's strike, for example, I didn't really know what a source's bias might be without digging through their entire website. And I've broken way too many computers that way. Thankfully, today's sponsor, Ground News, makes it easy to compare news sources, read between the lines of media bias, and break free from algorithms. And you can try it out right now by going to ground.news/NerdSync. I will have that linked in the description. Why is this so useful? So check this out. Right here is a story about how Marvel's Thunderbolts has halted production due to the writer's strike. The bias checker tools from Ground News let me see which publications have covered this story, which way they lean politically, how factual these sources typically are, and one of my favorite tools, who owns each outlet. So right here, the Washington Examiner is right-wing, has mixed factuality, and is owned by a billionaire conservative, so I'm probably not gonna cite that as one of the sources of my videos. But Deadline, who initially broke this story, leans left, has high factuality, and is owned by Penske Media Corporation. Penske? I don't know. Now look, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a bias while covering current events. I'm doing it right now. I have so many opinions that I let fly in this video. So the idea here is not to find, quote unquote, unbiased sources if such thing exists, but it's just nice to know where certain outlets land on the political spectrum so that I can be more informed about what I'm reading and have more additional transparency and context to the news that I take in. And you know how much I love context? That's like my whole personality. Could you dig through a half dozen Wikipedia articles to find this information every single time that you read an article online? Yeah, absolutely. You could, but realistically, you're not going to, right? And I don't blame you. It's a lot of work, but thankfully, you can have this information right on the page as you're reading the article thanks to the Ground News browser extension or mobile app. And it is just such a better and more convenient experience. And hopefully I've demonstrated that. So check out Ground News by going to my link in the description. That's ground.news/NerdSync. If you subscribe with my link, you will get 30% off of the Ground News Vantage subscription. Again, that's only available for the next 7 days starting now. So go check it out, ground.news/NerdSync, link in the description. Checking out that link also helps out my channel. Thank you so much. Oh, I could have made a reference to like a fastball special because this video is about Wolverine and X-Men. All right, anyway, bye.